Hello, welcome back after the break. I have the pleasure to be a moderator of the panel discussion now. So we'll organize it like that. First, we will cover some remaining questions which we didn't have time to really address before to particular talks. And then there will be, I hope, 50 or 45 minutes for discussion between all keynotes from today and also between all the people, all the guests present in our Google Meet studio. So today was very interesting, filled with presentations covering a lot of methodological issues. The topic of the symposium is Quali-Quanti methods integration. When we feel Quali-Quanti, there's I think a tendency to portray this as a sort of dichotomy, which needs to be addressed. But from the talks both yesterday and today, I think we are coming to an understanding that this is not a real dichotomy, a real division. For example, yesterday, Mark Bighart explained to us that both qualitative and quantitative data are really a form of measurement or description, where the two terms, measurement and description, shouldn't really be separated. Then today, for example, in the talk of Vasu Reddy, it was suggested that the division is blurry. It's not really possible to clearly make a distinction between quantitative and qualitative. It was also very, very visible in the talk of Li Wei. So we will address this in the panel discussion, but now let's get back to some remaining questions. I will try to select those which seems important to be addressed. I am sorry if I miss something. Let's get back to the morning talk by Vasu Reddy, where we are. Okay. Vasu, I hope you are.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what happened. My camera is on, but I don't know what happened. Anyway.
Right. So we have a question from Iris Nomiku. Vasu, is the thing in your presentation then related to surprise, and does this in turn relate to a gap in our understanding, just as we tell students that they need a gap in the literature for the research question?
Okay, I don't know why my camera is not showing, because it is on. Okay, never mind, you can hear me, and that is the key thing. I think knowing whether there is a gap or not a gap assumes that we would all agree about the knowledge that is produced by, let us say in this case, developmental science. So so for instance, in the case of the teasing, there wasn't a gap. There wasn't a kind of like, we don't know how teasing develops because that concept didn't exist, the thing didn't exist, or more or less, or whatever a phenomenon that you're dealing with may not even have already been demarcated, may not exist as an idea. So How do you know whether there is a gap in the literature when it hasn't been developed? That's one point. The other point is there may be a view, there may be already information, data about this phenomenon that you're talking about, but with which your take on the phenomenon or your measure, your perception of the thing that you measure and record doesn't agree with. So a gap doesn't quite do it, I think. It's not enough. Iris, speak, or somebody speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I think there were a couple of questions to John Sutton. Let me just find them. It should be. Yes, I think there's one. So this is a question which from I'm sorry if I mispronounce the name. It's from Jelle Brunberg. Jelle. Okay, I'm sorry. Jelle Brunberg. Yesterday, Bert Hodges talked about the values and norms implicit in what he called the ecosystem or setting. So, to what extent does memory research presuppose objective recall as a core value of memory? Would that differ from an ethnographic perspective, perhaps, more like creating a shared narrative as a value?
Sorry, I missed.
This is.
Sorry, I missed this. Can you say that? Are you talking to me? Or?
This is a question to John now.
To John, okay.
And we cannot hear John. Why is that?
John, we cannot hear you.
Well,
is it only us, or you don't
no?
hear
It's
John either?
It's John. I think John will return in a moment, and hopefully he will return with a voice.
Ah, but Bert is here. So, but did Bert see John's presentation? I don't think so. So we cannot ask.
Right.
John is.
How is that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. I don't know why that happens. Yeah, thanks, Jelle. Thanks, everybody. So does memory research presuppose an objective conception of the past? And is it different from ethnographic research, which might focus on narrative? Yeah, great question. I mean, memory research is incredibly diverse, of course, and ethnography does memory research. So I guess, Jelle, you're talking more about memory research in psychology as perhaps being fixed on a kind of objective conception. Even there, it's incredibly diverse. I guess, I mean, our work is strongly influenced by developmental psychology coming out of Vygotsky, where neither accuracy nor quantity is really the driving measure or focus. And in the cognitive psychology of autobiographical memory, I guess there's a consensus that there are many functions of remembering the past, the personal past, even before you get to talking about the past with others, as well as perhaps tracking the past. We care about social functions and especially about directing action into the future. I suppose with our work, one of the most important influences on this particular point was the work of Sue Campbell, the great, much missed Canadian philosopher. So Sue's notion of relational remembering focused on the role of the listener, of uptake, so that what I remember, the content, I mean, what I'm claiming about the past itself depends and is co-constructed and partly constituted by the interaction and the context in which I'm telling my story. We can't give up the claim to objective access to the past. We need that to witness, to bear witness to, for example, wrongs that have been done to us or to others. So we can't give up the hope of tracking the past, and remembering is a claim of making witness. But Sue also then talks about rather than accuracy or latching literally onto the past. So perhaps a better way of thinking of our relation to the past is fidelity, of trying to keep up a sort of faithfulness to the past, as she puts it, which allows for some role of values in the present, of constructing a usable past in a present context in which there are always disputes. And in cognitive psychology, I guess, yeah, there's some fixation on objective standards of accuracy, but I think it's a field in which narrative and the changeable, the malleable, the constructive nature of remembering have always been very much to the fore. So that this is why I guess we think our attempt to kind of link ethnographic and experimental projects, I mean, we can construct it as revolution, but it's not. We're just trying to do a sort of bridge building exercise between lab results and everyday settings repeatedly and feed the results back all the time. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And there is another question for you. It was asked after your presentation. It's from Hardeep. So, John, could you provide some specific examples of how objects in the environment can actively be used as scaffolding for memory? Also, how do we know that collaboratively created memories are not distorted versions of reality? Or to what extent they have been distorted?
Great. Okay, two different questions. So quickly about the first one, objects. So in the talk today, Howard was using the blank TV screen as an artifact that's scaffolding memory, projecting or remembering or imagining, using some kind of mental map that requires the object out there in the world. In general, places, well-known places, buildings, design, obviously modern technological artifacts, but we've always done this. We've always relied on artifacts and on other kinds of materialities. In music, for example, it's one of the most powerful scaffolds for memory. So it's everywhere. And the kind of metaphysical implications of the roles of objects and artifacts in memory can be debated, but we've got to accept them. Second question about collaboration and distortion is hard. Yes, in some cases, remembering the past together can lead to distortions. This is why I guess groupthink has had a bad press. It's why witnesses are not allowed to talk to each other in most legal systems about an event they've all seen. The idea of a shared rendering of the past can lead to all kinds of ideological pressures. I guess we see that as the dominant view in the law and the dominant view in cognitive psychology, that collaboration leads to distortion. Elizabeth Loftus is just the most famous of many people who have seen other people as a source of, as I said in the talk, a source of contamination and contagion. So we've tried to push back against that, not denying it can happen, but saying that there are lots of cases, especially where dyads, couples, or small groups have a shared history, have shared goals, have experienced a lot of events and episodes together, that collaboration can work. And yes, there is increasingly a lot of experimental evidence for this too. So just, I mean, a couple of examples. So think about different modes of collaborating to remember the past. At two extremes, there's just taking turns. A group of people sit around the table, I provide something, you provide something, the next person provides something. That produces no benefits. Everybody's still just in their own little world. If you encourage a group to collaborate by consensus, by actively engaging with each other and finding a consensus view about what happened, whether it's a set of sort of boring stimuli like word lists or something that means something more to them, they will catch errors. And so they'll, for example, pick up intrusions of a false memory that somebody has brought in, and it will be picked up by the group and ruled out. And the second point is that advantage of having fewer false memories is pretty much clear. It happens both in the collaboration, so when a group is working together to remember some past material, but also, and this is much more interesting to me, afterwards, right? When the individuals who are in a group go off and lead their separate lives, and you bring them back for a further test later as individuals, even if they had individually a false memory way back at the beginning, before the collaboration, they'll have ruled that out. The effect of the collaboration is actually to enhance accuracy. as a result of working together and weeding out the errors. That's with standard sort of quantitative and controlled measures, but it's a pretty cool result that's only come up in the last 10 years.
This is really interesting. When the group level is really something functional, not.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to get group advantages. I mean, memory is just one case here. Lots of psychological work on decision making, for example, shows just how hard it is to find advantages. All the talk of emergence, synergy, it takes special conditions. It depends on the kind of the group, the kind of interaction, the processes involved, and the kind of material. So group processes like this are not amenable to any quick fix, which is why a lot of our, I guess, training exercises and group dynamics at universities and so on and other organizations don't work. Brainstorming, right, doesn't automatically produce creative genius like that. It takes a lot of slow building from the ground up.
Thank you very much. I have one more question. It's related to, it's addressed to Sarah Kim from Juan Loiza. So it's in the context of this antagonistic interaction of Muay Thai. Is caring for the well-being of the opponent in antagonistic sports something that emerges in the data? For example, when one person feels that the opponent is risking too much because of a lesion, etc.
Yeah, thanks. Interesting question. I guess it's not something that's appearing directly in my data. I have asked questions to prompt answers in that direction, but I think what might be possible to say and something about is the general culture that is a part of this sport, which I guess there is a type of self-understanding within the sport of respect and agreed upon kinship. So usually you will see people showing respect by bowing after a fight and showing that type of care. But in terms of the fight context under the set of rules inside of the fight, then everyone is on their own risk and on the same terms. And that type of collegiance isn't present inside of the frames of the fight. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you. Probably there's a lot of questions that I missed, but it's not the end of the world, I guess. And if you feel compelled to answer some questions, all of them should be on the chat. So you have your own right to do it. I will not try to hijack the whole interaction, but I will try to structure it somehow. So maybe we'll establish a simple convention. If you want to say something, take part in the conversation at any moment to make a remark or address somebody directly, you may put a small dot in the chat, and then I will give the voice over to you. But first, I think I will start open this larger discussion, and I would like to open it with a small provocation, maybe, addressing it to Vasu. So I was listening to your talk, which was beautiful for me because it was also a personal story. So you were talking about your research, but everything was present there. Your curiosity, your story of coming to grasp the phenomena that you want to study. But then I was listening to Michael Richardson, also very beautiful talk about the formal tools and formal systems. And of course, we are these talks are somehow related because we are in the same symposium and we are trying to tackle the same kind of problems. But then, Vasu, do you see a place for such hard formalization in your research and with the phenomena that you are studying? And if so, where is this place?
Yes, the short answer is yes, absolutely I do. I think, for instance, we did this is a different, okay, in relation to the teasing, one of the things that I had wanted to explore was timing of one action, of the relative timing of offers and withdrawals or whatever. It is kind of difficult to do, and we never actually set it up. But I think this is exactly Mike Richardson's is exactly the kind of analysis I would have liked to have done. We did do cross-recurrence analysis with another study that also began with personal experience, and this was to do with a personal experience of noticing that at about 4 months, when you go to pick up a baby from a car chair, you find in your fingers that the back of the baby is already arched. Okay, so that leads to the question, okay, something's happening here. The baby's already got the body ready. There is anticipation here of the impending action, and maybe even in your approach, and we don't know. I did not know how to measure it initially, and then many years later, we did a study with measuring pickups in the lab in a semi-naturalistic setting, but using sensor mats. And for that, the data was just perfect for a cross-recurrence analysis at different points in the approach of the mother. So the answer to your question is, I think, is yes, but I think really, even in everyday life, one perceives patterns. And these kinds of methods are just giving us more sensitive and clever ways of analyzing patterns. So the teasing infant is also perceiving patterns in the adults in order to violate them, test them, push them, and so on. So I don't see that there is any conflict there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think it does. So let me elaborate. Is it that is okay? Is it that somehow it stimulates also? It speaks also to your curiosity. So the results from this kind of dynamical analysis, they are the same sort of patterns that may stimulate your curiosity when you are observing phenomena in, just as they happen in real time. Do you engage with your data and formalization results in the same way that you engage with observation?
I think so. I mean, I think yes, I think perhaps it's a slightly different question that one is curious about, but I think it is the same feeling. So another place where the curiosity is absolutely intense is with eye tracking data. I just think that technology is wonderful. I mean, it is behavior, but it is a kind of it's like wearing glasses, suddenly after having been a little bit, short-sighted or something. So yes, it is a curiosity. Yes, there's different kinds of curiosity, and I think both of those things are curiosities about the nature of patterns and the nature of people's reactions. So the other curiosity about is teasing like pretending, that was a theoretical curiosity. Yeah. So why are people so stuck on one way of doing things that they cannot? That's a different kind of curiosity about a different aspect of science.
I think Sarah Bro Pedersen, you had a comment, so please.
Yeah, it was more, perhaps it's the wrong question to ask whether this kind of research would fit into your field, because, I mean, also with the topic of the conference, we're all looking at the same phenomenon, like human behavior. So perhaps it's more relevant to see that it's a matter of scale, or whether we want to provide more abstract and general descriptions, or whether we are interested into going into the particular aspects of human behavior. So I think that maybe that's more relevant to ask that kind of question, and that relates to motivations and what we're interested in, rather whether we are using different methods or something like that in the question that you raised before. So that was just a comment whether we are actually, and that's again also goes into the discussion about the descriptions and the explanations, or the how or the why, and the different kind of things that we are interested in science. And for me, it's more a matter of scales or levels of descriptions, whether it's about different phenomena that we are interested in. So that's why the formalism perspective gives you the very general explanation about function and human behavior, but it doesn't really account for experience. So if we're interested in that, and that particular way that it impacts at a larger scale, I mean, that's just a different kind of question that we're interested in. And of course, we can't be expert in all these different kinds of, zooming in or zooming out scales. So we specialize in one area because we're interested in particular things of human behavior. But in the end, it's the same. I mean, hopefully, it's the same thing that we try to do research on. It was a comment, I guess.
Do I see raised hand?
Yeah, I think I just would like to qualify one thing. We're using the word formalism, but I think Mike and I would both agree that it's just a way of grounding it. I completely agree with Sarah. The questions that I'm interested in personally, but professionally, are qualitatively couldn't be more different from the questions that Michael, but there's a that Michael's interested in, but there's a shared sort of, can we use this at these different levels? And so, that's, I think that conceptualizing things in this way, it is, as Sarah says, providing this sort of framework for tackling it, but it should never be seen as more rigid or inflexible. I know you're not saying that, but I think that, part of what we're bringing to that, we can't talk about everything. I think timescale is really critical, and that is a much more consistent, direct line to the questions you're asking. But again, I think, Michael, I would say that Michael has convinced me over the years that it is possible to have it grounded in this way. But yeah, anyway, so I would just, I might use the word grounded instead of formalism, just to demonstrate the ability that I think we haven't taken it there yet, but that's where we're trying to get, is can we start asking these bigger questions at the same time that we're studying this very specific pattern of behavior.
And I'll just, following up on something that Vasu just said, I mean, I can slap a motion tracker on anything and measure it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better measure than asking an undergraduate student to code it subjectively. I mean, there are different scales of analysis that are better in certain contexts and for answering certain questions, but it doesn't necessarily make them more objective or subjective. I mean, again, I throw motion trackers on things all the time. I choose which variables I measure. I choose which timescales to analyze. I choose, which analyses to. I mean, at every level there is this interplay of qualitative and quantitative. So to say that there's this idealist separation between them is just ridiculous. And this is why I like to tell physicists, I'm not jealous of you. You study simple stuff, we study complex stuff. That's just what it is.
I don't see a dot in the chat, but I see a raised pen on Suna's screen. So perhaps, Suna, do you want to?
Yes, yeah. I lost the idea of the dot. Sorry about that. not even sure what dot I should make, but okay, never mind. So I just want to, follow up on what Rachel just said, and actually, so I was said, oh yeah, that's right, and then my second thought, no, because I think what you did was something slightly different than what you just said, because I think the beauty of your work is that you actually grounded it not in the formalism, but you grounded it in a way of interpreting that formalism in a very, very meaningful way. And that reminded me of something that Joanna said in a meeting we had in, I think, 2016, because she's part of our advisory board on a project on psychotherapy. And Joanna said something like, so human beings are so evolutionarily complex that the only instrument that is sensitive enough to measure human behavior is the human being. And I think that's really at the core here, because even if we do all the kind of formalisms or the kind of what we traditionally understand as measurements, not in the big hard sense from yesterday, but is also, we all bring it together in making sense of the data. We might have intermediate steps of measuring or formalizing or whatever, but we need to bring it back. So I think so that's why I really like the last part of what you said, Rachel, that it's so much more integrated. And so as part of that project we have on psychotherapy, I was interviewing a psychiatrist, and he said something that was interesting, I think. He said that, so one of the problems in psychiatry is that they have this huge apparatus for a huge typology of different kinds of diagnosis. You probably know that. So he said the problem is with this apparatus that it has been developed to secure a higher level of reliability, meaning that different psychiatrists would reach the same conclusions. However, he added, the problem is that it doesn't really have much validity, because the kind of diagnosis doesn't really help to treat the patient, because the apparatus is not developed for that, but for having a reliable scoring of the patients. And if that's true, and I just take that on face value, it's really a way, and here I like also what Li Wei was talking about, because that opens a whole new avenue to have that much more like case-based approach to look at various aspects, and that's where, to me, the great things about the dynamical systems theory comes into play, because you can have that level of description on a case base. You can really get round like singular cases, and you can have various ways of, you can formalize that. If you're good at that, I would suck at that, but never mind. Or you can describe it, and the key point is whether I have a formalization, a formalized description, or I have a more qualitatively dependent description. There would still be criteria of making sense of it in an intersubjective phase of doing research together. So even if I have like a purely qualitative description and analysis and interpretation of my data, I would still need to do so in a way where I share the data and I can have other people like looking over my shoulder and to validate what I'm looking at. So it's not like it's purely subjective if it's qualitative. And I think perhaps actually the kind of work that you guys do in the dynamical systems work is kind of bridging that divide too.
Thank you.
We agree completely.
I think it sort of, this comment sort of connects with what I think on broader social impact. So let's say that we have already some tools, for example, coming from dynamical systems or from cognitive ethnography or from other domains to really analyze single cases, to really see the complexity of what is happening, and to consider the whole person, not just some fragments or measured variables. But then if we look at how real social policies are shaped, then we very often see just the opposite of that. There was an example from yesterday, discussion on reading from one of our participants, on how in the UK, in elementary school, learning outcomes in reading are operationalized as the number of words that a child can read in 5 minutes, which, as is clear, evident from all your talks, is sort of pointless. It's not really the phenomena that we are trying to grasp. But how can we as researchers can have any impact with this research on the real social policies? Maybe Li Wei, do you want to start with that?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the last bit of your question?
Of course. So my question is, how can we and our research achieve real impact and really impact social policies in a given country, for example?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I'm sure we're all thinking about it. I mean, I guess our approach has always been to involve the people that we're working with as much as possible. I think it's easier to do when we are doing community-based work, and including family-based work, ethnography. It's a little harder to do that for lab-based work. Nevertheless, I think I learned totally by accident from some colleagues in the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, working with African communities on health communication, health education issues. And they often say the simple fact that we as scientists, as it were, go into a community and want to do a research, that itself, and ask the right questions, and it's important to ask the right questions, will have an impact, because it will alert policymakers and key stakeholders to the importance of these issues. It may well be something that they've never thought of as important at all. When they see, oh, there are academics and scientists coming to ask these questions, wanting to set up a research, they will wonder why. And if we can explain why that it is important to ask these questions, then I think we will have an impact. Asking the right questions, raising awareness, and connect with both policymakers and the people in the community.
Thank you very much. So involving the people, actually, policymakers also in your research. Does anybody else want to have a comment on that? Yes, please, Rachel.
I would just say that I think what a lot of our work highlights, though, is that, a lot of social policy, if you're going even on the assumption that it's based on any kind of fact, is very much the fact of how many words can they read in a certain amount of time, whether it's the appropriate fact or not. And I think what the kind of research we're doing more broadly, yes, we need to have the stakeholders asking the questions themselves, but I think it's also the fact that we're assessing behavior in different ways. A lot of people want to throw self-report out, the baby with the bathwater, but John has shown us that you just have to shift the lens and look at it in a different way. So I think we can use the tools we've already used in a traditional way, but I think these dynamical systems, but all of these methods, these sort of, is it a thing phenomenology, right? So naming things or labeling things as worthy of the question, those are the things we can bring to the table that inform policy too, and really substantial policy. I mean, I'm sorry, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is salient to me because she just passed and she's one of my heroes. But one of the most genius things that this woman did was fight for gender equity for women by making salient the threat that men would experience based on inequity. So she knew that she couldn't just highlight the problem for what it was. She had to flip it on its head and, you know, twist the angle. And I think that that's what the past yesterday and today, I think that's what a lot of the work that we're trying to do, maybe not doing it yet, but we're trying to do, is highlighting that we can inform social policy by saying, you know, to oversimplify, there are different ways to ask these questions, and our behavior as well as our active voices can inform policy. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Can you mute us?
There was one interesting suggestion for a topic that we may cover during this panel, which I would like to bring. Of course, if anybody else want to say something regarding to the previous topic, then please let me know. It's not closed yet.
Here, Juan. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I will try to bring it up. It's from Juan Loiza. So perhaps the question for the panel is no longer to find a place somewhere between quali and quanti, but beyond this, into what has been identified as the decolonization of methodologies. What are your thoughts about this? So I guess it's a question for everybody. It relates both to yesterday's Hannes talk and also to today's talks.
Okay, I can start off.
Great.
Well, okay, maybe I have misunderstood what decolonization of methodologies is, but to me, while destroying a colonial attitude means rebalancing power structures, and the power structures and imbalance is definitely there between different methodologies. You know, there's no question about it. Like, experimental methodologies are powerful for lots of different reasons, but that's not the same as saying that the distinction is a problem. So decolonization says rebalance the powers between them, but I think what we have been arguing, that even drawing the distinction between them is not perhaps always, but very often itself the problem. End of over.
Yes, I also think there are two different issues. However, I think there is one thing that sort of joins them, and one thing that emerged in our symposium very strongly was this lack of speaking about experience in quantitative methodologies. Because first of all, I don't know about you, but I feel that I am a minority when I try to bring up the focus on qualitative observation. I do feel colonialized somehow, and struggling to be like the others, and publish this super quantitative stuff and so on. So I have those feelings, and it's great to be able to talk about it. But also in the Quali-Quanti distinction, and this is something that I even didn't want to name the workshop Quali-Quanti, because it's a immediate sort of clash. That's why it's not named like that. But here we also see that what we are missing, what we are really struggling to do, is not to link the Quali-Quanti, is to bring experience back. I think that's the thing. So this experience is maybe in both of those dimensions that Juan is mentioning, but in a different way. Yes. Help me here.
Yep.
Suna, please.
I forgot the microphone. This time I did write dot actually. So just okay. So oh yeah. So okay, I'm not sure what decolonization means in this context. So I kind of interpreted it differently. So to me, the colonial attitude to doing any kind of research is, in my perspective, the very idea that so this is how you do it. So this is like the recipe of doing science. If you want to study that, you have to do this, and it's that kind of inflexibility that is like a colonial power that I think should be overthrown. And I think that goes for both so-called qualitative and so-called quantitative approaches. I think we have all read tons of studies that kind of like take some phenomenon and crush it down, perhaps both, into like something that we have seen before. So quantitatively, you have come up with some p-value and you have just measured something, or qualitatively, so you can have made a description analysis in terms of something that you have seen before. And I think it's like so when we talk about methodology, the key point is that you have a methodology that is developed and sensitive to whatever you want to study and the interest you have in that. That's the engagement and actually the love that Hanne was talking about yesterday. If you want to have a loving relationship, it's not about conquering. That's something else, right? So in science, if you want to study something with that attitude, you have to come up with ways of studying that is very, very sensitive to that specific phenomenon that you're interested in. And so where the obligation comes from doing science is that you are transparent about that kind of sensitized way of approaching and engaging with that object of study. So I think that's, for me, is the key decolonization, that you don't like we stop measuring each other whether people are true to the method or they do it the right way that is usually done, but we actually have the leeway to, not leeway, but the leeway to wiggle around to find the best ways of engaging with whatever kind of object we want to study. So that's how I interpreted Huang's great question.
We had a small exchange on the internal chat about free club of researchers which call themselves not interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, but no disciplinary researchers. To which Vasu replied that indisciplined researchers might be even better. Did I see John? And
yeah, just I mean to just follow up on Suna's points, I agree completely. I mean I think as I see the link between topics discussed here and decolonizing methodologies, the link is not so much with critique of the quantitative or with science. I mean, maybe with some mistaken views of science. I guess it's more the general kind of 4E embodied, situated and distributed perspective that and the focus on interaction and coordination that so many of our participants have got. I mean, just two quick directions. I mean, the critical mode I see surprisingly less done than it should be is looking at specific historical, cultural, political evils done by individualism, by the combination of rationalism and the mistaken view that mental life is inside the head, and the very direct effects that's had on educational practice. And to finish with the more positive point, to help those who've been affected negatively by those political and educational errors, to, where possible, recover fragmented forms of transmission through embodied knowledge, through social practices, through performance. And I mean, there should be no reason not to be working together, not to be doing research on disadvantaged peoples without them, but to be working together, as a couple of people have said already, and finding ways to use our particular situated, embodied, distributed perspective, which is the truth about mind and culture, to make things better politically.
Hanne, I'm wondering, would you like to add something?
Yes, I like those points, but I would like to push it a little bit further still to also shut up as Western scientists and listen. Because what we do still in how we are talking now, and I'm coming to this realization so slowly, and I'm amazed at how slowly I get to this realization, but participation means that also we need to make space, and still that's an active thing that we are doing then, as, you know, yeah, I think it's also about shutting up and listening. And I don't know how else to say it more clearly. Even saying more is too much in a way. I don't know if I'm making a point. Yeah, but even more than, so John just put in the chat, nothing about us without us. Yeah, exactly. That's from the point of view of for instance, autistic people. So they say that and we listen. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, and that's true participation then, I think.
But it is challenging, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
because if we don't have a way of establishing relationships and of establishing trust, which, as you know, can take so long and be so hard, it's very easy taking that line, nothing about us without us, to just do nothing, right? And you know, sometimes we do have to take risks.
Yeah, that's also.
Can I just say, you know, I agree with Hannah's point very much, and also John's point. I think it's really important not to be so focused on a conclusion as such. I mean, you know, doing science is so much driven to have a conclusion, and the process is, you know, has to be conclusive. I see the whole process of doing research as multiple and continuous, and you know, it's different ways of interpreting you know, what we find, and I think it's important to have multiple perspectives. Especially when we're working with minoritized communities, so we want the researchers and the participants to have their say in the interpretation of what we come up as kind of findings. You know, this is our interpretation, very subjective. How do you interpret that? Why did you think you did that, or these people have done that? And it's going to be a continuous, ongoing process. It's not aiming to have some sort of conclusion or one single conclusion. I think that's quite important.
I just want to, I mean, I agree with everything that everyone has said, but I mean, Sierra had a great question I just saw in the questions about Black Lives Matter and coordination, and I'm not going to answer that question, although it's a great question. It's a fantastic,
Sierra. We'll talk.
Fantastic question. But I just want to push back a little bit in saying that not all perspectives are equal. And I think what's going on in the States at the moment is I mean, I lived in the States for a long time. I feel as American as Rachel, this is not a criticism of the United States, but you see this all around the world. But I mean, Trumpism is the perfect example of where breadth is given to arguments that are not on an equal footing as other arguments. So while I think it's an excellent idea to open up and listen, and as a scientist to stick to one dogma or one perspective is not fruitful, there does still need to be at least some criteria at which we can evaluate constructive progress versus destructive progress. And I think that becomes really difficult. I mean, I don't have a response to that, but I just bring that up in that I think that's what we're searching for, is as much as we want to decolonize and bring everything together, at the same time we need to figure out how we do that in a way that still allows us to move forward rather than backwards. I mean, I don't have that, but it's just a thought.
But that's what Vasu was saying.
Yeah, I'm not
talking about rebalancing the power.
Yeah. It's just, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not disagreeing with anybody. It's just, it's not. There's no easy fix.
We have a small exchange in the chat, just to include it in the discussion. So Joanna Jurewicz wrote, what strikes me is that even when the experience is studied, it's the experience of a small number of people, often or mostly from Western culture, and the conclusions concern people in general. To what John Sutton replied, yes, undermine the myth of science as a quest for certainty, and highlight instead its extraordinary diversity, its open-ended, motley messiness. And continuing Konrad Zieliński, I agree with Li Wei about not focusing so much on conclusions, but what instead of conclusions, how the process influences, example, social policies, referring to Julian's remark, how to show process. To which reply by Li Wei, interpretation and multiple perspectives. So we are now in chat-based interaction, but maybe going back to voice interaction, I think Sune.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I'll start like Mike just started. So I totally agree with everyone, but just add something else. So, but I think one way of seeing this is actually in terms of what Bert said yesterday about the multiple values, because and Bert said this quite quickly in his talk, but he really fleshes this out in I think especially in the 92 paper together with Ruben Barron, that if you have a system that is like monolithically obsessed with one value only, that system is going to be either evil or some other negative quality. And perhaps the problem with the way we've done science is it has been so focused on certainty or truth or whatever. It has to be balanced, as you say in the chat. It has to be balanced against the kind of perspective, but still some kind of perspectivist realism or some kind of multi-perspectivity, because it, yeah, but we still need to have some kind of obligation, because as Mike rightly said, not all perspectives are equally valid, and we need to have a way of discussing that even if we have like multiple perspectives, we still need to have some criteria for assessing whether some are better than others. And I think, I mean, embedding that discussion in a values realizing way of thinking is very good, because I mean, the kind of political stuff that you refer to is an excellent example of things where people push for something that creates more pain, more inequality, more alienation, and that obviously cannot be true or good in any sense of the words. So I think that would be my bit, is to embed this discussion in a larger context. In Germany, the philosopher of science Peter Fenke, he talks about, so his phrases, so we're still looking for truth, but it's like a solution that has more than, or like an equation that has more than one solution. I think that's the multi-perspectivity that we should go for.
It's a beautiful thought to collect and somehow remember from this conversation. I know that we are by standard time, we are reaching the end of the panel discussion. I have no idea how to end it, really, how to wrap it up, especially since it's so vivid right now. And I feel that we are having a very interesting conversation on multiple different modalities right now, because we have audio, video, we have two chats, and there's discussion going everywhere. So I really hope that this system will somehow reach the conclusion on its own, from its own internal dynamics. So what do you think? How this dynamic process shall proceed right now?
You can all switch on your mics, for example, and let's see what happens.
Maybe we don't need the conclusion, just interpretations and multiple perspectives, as Professor Oliway suggested on the chat.
Well, thanks to you guys for organizing this.
Indeed, that's yeah. Thank you very much.
I like to say that Joanna has already done everything that we've all talked about already. If you go and read her work, so.
I didn't hear you. Can you repeat?
Joanna has already done everything that we've talked about in some way in her work before. So.
Well, I must say that so if the panel I love this, that the panel discussion doesn't end in the conclusion, but so let's end it in this way, right? So all the participants in the panel, to all the speakers today, and to all the speakers in the entire symposium. And to all our participants on YouTube, I am very sorry that you weren't able to be with us with your video, but your questions were present, and some of them which were not answered will be still kept with us for the future. So now we are at the moment that we need to close the conference, the symposium, but we do hope that we have engaged you in a way that you will stay with us for the entire year. So this is just an opening of a conference. Finalize 1 year from now, and perhaps even then not. So this is a process in which I hope that we all can engage. One thing that I forgot to mention is some quantity aspects. We were sponsored by Warsaw University, by the University of Warsaw, sorry. So I should mention that. And I think that some questions that emerged will accompany us in a year. And maybe I will just say a couple of things that touched me really deeply, that it made me realize, our conversations made me realize how deeply we should reach in order to think about the issues of and this is as deep as basic normativity, basic engagement, basic ontology. This is issues such as engagement in science and drawing science from engagement. And I really do. This is the issue of how language comes into it, and what is the naming of a thing that we want to study, and then what is hooking. I love this metaphor of hooking the others to draw your concerns and to help you naming things that Vasu brought. So I really hope that all those issues will stay with us, will keep pestering us for the entire year, and that we come back in 2021 in real persons and will be able to finally see each other in 3D and interact. Yes, Rachel, I don't know about you, but I really felt this time that I really miss conferences. For some time it was nice not to travel, but nothing can really substitute for being in person. And so let's keep our fingers crossed for that. I wanted once again to thank my co-organizers, Julian, Konrad, Eva, Anna, and Victor. Without their hard work, I mean, this was really everything was so new for us, and they were excellent. Julian was saying, "No, I have everything under control." We never believed him, but he was right, and I think that that was really a feat for all of you, my team of organizers, that your very, very hard work all the time, and not only on the basis of on the organization, but very deep meritoric and thematic input into the conference was very, very precious for me. So thanks again for all the speakers, and let's see each other in 1 year. Julian, what did I forget?
Well, of course, we also need to all thank Joanna, because this is the conference, and this symposium is her vision, is her drive, is her hope and belief that yes, we may do it, even though there is a lockdown, we cannot travel, but we still can reach and meet and engage in some important way. So a big round of applause to Joanna too.
Thank you. Thank you to all. All right, the sad moment. See you all.
Thank you very much.
But not hear you all in 1 year. Oh, Rachel is having a glass of wine. Anyway, you wanted to say something?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. See you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yo.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Let's keep in touch, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Shouldn't we close the screen? Close the stream?
The stream is still waving to us. Thank you all. Thank you very much for your being there. We felt that you are there, so it was really something. And one conclusion from this conference is that we probably will keep streaming some of the keynotes. That would be very good for larger group of people to participate. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.